A Nandroids Dream, Chapter 5. Another night of incorrect backups and replays from Makina Beach. This really was how it was going to be from now on, but that was fine. The random events, both real and fictional, played over and over, just as vivid and intense as if it was happening again, all through the night. Her desire during each moment was never fully satiated, only matched by her eagerness for morning to arrive and to spend a new unique day with her owner, which finally came after many, many trips across the sandy beach of Makina. She popped awake as her recharge finished, and this time it was still morning, with dim light filtering through the window and the sounds of birds welcoming the day with their morning calls. She checked her small clock on the dresser and saw it was still a bit before her owner awoke. She relaxed and laid back, knowing she had plenty of time before they got up to get breakfast prepared, and let the last few memories of her dreams drift off into the still morning. What a blissful feeling. She disconnected from her charging chair and began her day. She straightened her maid uniform and quietly exited her room, heading to the kitchen to make a quick breakfast as she heard the loud droning of her owner's alarm going off soon after, right on time. Breakfast was always a quick meal. Her owner wasn't a morning person, and it had taken her several weeks pestering before they had begun to eat something in the early hours. A quick bowl of oatmeal, with extra care to decorate it with a large heart made from the last of the strawberries, one sliced orange, and a glass of milk perfected the breakfast scene as she placed the items lovingly on the table and waited for her owner's entrance. Keeping the perfect pace as always, her owner entered nearly ready for work and took a seat at the table with a groggy greeting. As they sat, she gave them her usual chipper good morning, and sat down as well, scooting her chair closer to theirs. She was becoming more and more bold, anything to be closer to them, and dreamily watched as they tucked into their food. They didn't speak, but a silent morning was par the course, and as the meal began to wind down, her solid gaze hadn't gone unnoticed. "Something on your mind? You've been staring for a few minutes," they said, popping the last of the orange into their mouth. The question caught her off guard, not realizing she'd been so entranced. Losing her focus like this, dealing with these emotions, was beginning to get difficult. I just wanted to say I hope you have a nice day at work." Not untrue, but it masked something deeper. "With the accounts we've got coming in today, probably not," they scoffed, clearly defeated before even leaving for work, but they downed the last of their milk and gave her a smile nonetheless. "But thank you. What about you? Any big plans for today?" She had thought a bit already about what she was going to do today while making breakfast. Some more origami and a few chores. Probably not any TV, though, at least not until her owner came home. It wasn't anything remotely close enough to fill her day, though. "I hadn't thought too much on it yet, but I'll try doing some more of the same stuff as yesterday. Would you like a suggestion?" "Of course." "There's that little nature trail at the park, right? I know it's not anything fancy, but if you like the Arboretum, you'd probably enjoy that too." Near the edge of their community was a park with a walking trail. She'd seen it a few times when she would make quick trips to a nearby convenience store for last-minute essentials, but it wasn't anything that had ever interested her before. Until now, that is. Oh yes, that does sound lovely. She felt a rush of excitement at the chance for this small adventure, another unique event, all on her own. "Only if you want to, though. Not everything you do has to be in the house." "I know." While that was true, coming up with things on her own was difficult. Her original hobbies of cleaning and cooking were now waning in interest, and most of the new ones she discovered were only interesting in that they were tangentially related to her owner in some way. Her owner stood and began to gather their used bowl and cutlery, but she reached out and quickly nabbed them up first. "I can do that for you," she happily quipped as she scurried the items from the table to the sink. She stopped as she turned back to her owner, who had a dour look on their face. Had she done something wrong again? They only held it for a moment before smiling and thanking her for clearing the table. She followed them solemnly to the front door as they prepared to leave, gathering their work bag and putting on their shoes. She stood close by, trying to soak up the last few moments she had with them. As they reached the front door, they beamed at her one final time. "Take it easy today, all right?" "Okay. Have a good day." The two stared at each other for only a moment, but it felt much longer to her. She felt she should do something to break the tense atmosphere, but there was no way she would so blatantly and boldly give them a hug on her own. But they didn't initiate one either and gave a quick nod, opened the door, and left. She moved to a small window nearby and watched as they got in their car and pulled out onto the street, leaving her alone and empty. It felt wrong to sit in silence, but there was only one thing on her mind. 3 simple words. Thoughts were one thing, but speaking such things aloud was something entirely different, even though she felt something needed to be said in the deafening silence this empty house provided. "They wanted something from you, that's why they hesitated." She didn't respond, instead letting this thought weigh heavy on her mind. Did they hesitate, or was it all in her head? If they wanted something, all they had to do was ask. They're probably thinking the same thing about you right now. You just had to ask. Too far. You don't know what they want to say, so stop saying those things. She spun around and briskly left those thoughts at the door and made her way back into the house proper. She returned to the kitchen and thought about what needed done for chores. The usual things, of course. Their bed needed made, laundry gathered, everything they had interacted with today needed put back in its proper place. Then there were the more mundane tasks, the vacuuming she had put off, the few dirty dishes that now lay in the sink. But really, did that matter? Nothing had changed between yesterday and today to warrant vacuuming, and they had so many other clean cups and bowls. What did it matter if she didn't do those right now? She left the kitchen and went to her owner's bedroom, still excited for certain chores at least. As was the case yesterday, with the utmost care she fluffed their pillow, straightened the sheets, caressing the indent they had left until it was perfectly flat again, like a brand new bed. Well, that was 2 minutes of her day gone. She gathered their clothes from the previous day, setting them in the empty laundry hamper next to their door. Now it was time for... She couldn't think of anything. Well, she could think of some things, but vacuuming, the dusting, the dishes, the windows, all of it seemed so unimportant. So maybe that just meant it was free time. So she collected her origami book and took it to the kitchen table, flipping through the pages to find something interesting to make. It was full of all kinds of things besides flowers and animals. Colorful sections dedicated to vehicles, random objects, and just interesting designs scattered throughout the book, slowly increasing in difficulty the further she dove. She randomly chose a few and made a car, a boat, a small box with matching lid, and a 10-point star. All interesting and fun to make, but not as much to her liking as the flowers had been. She checked that section again and saw she only had a small handful left and decided against making them now. She instead took some pages from the things she had no interest in folding and used them to create more of the same flowers in different colors. After a few more had been made, she packed them into the bouquet on the table to give it a more full and varied appearance. It was lovely to look at. Her day had barely begun, but already she was running out of things to do without needing to care for the home. Now was as good as a time as any for her walk. She went back to her room, changed into her normal clothes, and her new clothes. She changed into her new clothes from Makina Beach, and before she left, went to her owner's room one more time to fluff their pillow. This was a new feeling. Even though it hadn't been that long, she already missed them dearly. Being near their bed made her feel better, and she laid her hands softly on the sheets, pretending she could feel her owner asleep underneath. If they didn't care about a hug, they probably wouldn't care if you tucked them in at night. What a silly idea. What a foolish, funny, wonderful idea. She sat at the edge of the bed and daydreamed about tucking her owner in, caring for them and pulling the covers up to their chin before giving them a soft goodnight kiss. She could never. Or could she? They wouldn't mind. They enjoy being with you. Maybe. But if I decide to do it, it will be because I want to, not at your command. She huffed herself up and left the room. This little voice was just full of suggestions. That walk would be perfect now, help her clear her head. So she left home, being sure to lock up, and started down the road to the park. The morning was crisp and clear, perfect weather for being outside. The park wasn't too far by a direct route, but she wasn't going to cut through yards and alleys to get there, so the trip took longer as she followed the winding streets of the neighborhood. What little neighborhood noise there was this morning slowly died out completely as she arrived at the nearly empty park. School was in session and most people were at work, leaving only a handful of people to enjoy the morning. The park itself was only a few blocks long and more like a glorified field splattered with some toys for children and a few covered picnic tables. But along the far edge, the land was undeveloped, and a walking trail had been added in, cutting through the foliage and meandering on a few acres. The quiet ambiance of the previous neighborhood was now replaced with the sounds of nature. Grass and leaves rustled and all manner of small wildlife scurried around in the nearby underbrush. It was nice to see the patches and bundles of flowers that dotted the trail, but nothing nearly as entertaining as the arboretum. The flowers and leaves were simpler, with only primary shades of color, but they were just as plentiful as the arboretum and were set along the entire path. She took her time walking, looking at all the sights and enjoying the sounds of nature. As she walked along the trail, she passed by an old couple, out for a morning walk, heading in the opposite direction. They paid her no mind, but she was interested in them. The old man and woman hobbled along past her, and she wondered if her owner would want to come here with her. It was a nice walk and close to home, but they'd never talked about coming here before. As the trail wound around and her thoughts were once again fully on her owner, she started to get anxious. How long had she been gone? There wasn't any rush for her to get home, per se, but what if her owner tried to call and she wasn't there for them? The longer the walk took, the more this thought grew, until finally she began as quick a jog as she could manage to return home in a timely manner. It wasn't that she hadn't enjoyed herself or that she wanted to be home especially, she just didn't want to lose an opportunity to speak with her owner. Dealing with these emotions was beginning to get difficult. The return home was just as empty. No one to see the comical scene of a Nandroid in unique clothes power walking down a sidewalk. She got home and opened the door as fast as she could to the still silent house, exactly as she had left it. She slumped as she thought about her behavior. Her owner had suggested she go on this walk. Of course they weren't going to call today. She let out a sigh and entered, closing the door behind her. Maybe she could have spent some more time at the park, but she was home now, so time to try something else. She spent the rest of her day around the house doing nearly the same as yesterday. The few chores she could bring herself to care about. She turned the TV on for a few minutes, but still found it to be quite boring. She even tried turning the radio on and listening to some music. While nice, it wasn't really helping pass the time. To help fight the onset of boredom, she finally accepted it and decided that she could do the very small amount of laundry that had accumulated from yesterday. She went to grab the few dirty clothes from her owner's bedroom, but was hit with a wave of melancholy as she entered. She wanted to speak to them, to be near them right now. But it would be horrible manners for her to call them at work just to chat. She walked over and sat down on their bed, gently fluffing the pillow for the 100th time today. There had to be something she could do, some way she could change things to let her talk to her owner in the middle of the day like this. They're work documents. They've needed you to bring some before. She stopped. Once in a blue moon, her owner would call her from work and request she bring them some paperwork that they had forgotten or misplaced, so it wasn't out of the ordinary that it could happen. She rose slowly and flowed over to the large ornate desk in the corner of her owner's room, covered in papers and documents and packets of all kinds and thicknesses. She knew it was wrong. She knew it was unbecoming. But she began rifling through the papers on top after doing a double take around the room, just to be sure nothing could see her. Her owner's nondescript job was mostly handling clients that didn't fit into the cookie-cutter system their employer had, picking up loose ends and helping people through the bureaucracy of an antiquated system. And there on top of it all, a few filled-out pages with a sticky note for an appointment they had tomorrow morning. A plan began to form in her head. An evil plan. If, on this one occasion, she were to help this packet become misplaced, her owner would call tomorrow and ask for her help in finding it. Nothing out of the ordinary, nobody would be inconvenienced because she could bring it immediately, and most importantly, no one would be any the wiser. She sat in silence and pondered this predicament for several minutes. Really, who was being hurt if she did this? Nobody. And yet, she would be able to spend time with her owner and be helpful to them. With an uncanny calmness regarding the situation, she took the papers from the desk and ferried them to her own room, opening a drawer on her dresser and stuffing them at the very bottom of the items within. As she closed the drawer, the small reservation she felt was left inside with the papers. The deed was now done. There wasn't any downside to this. She felt elated at this new prospect she had created for herself and couldn't help but laugh to herself, perhaps a bit longer than was justified. Dealing with these emotions was beginning to get difficult. Once she regained her composure, the joy she was feeling remained, and she thought it was best to reward herself with an early dinner prep. She popped into the kitchen and began another quick meal, stuffed cabbage. She went to and fro, gathering the necessary ingredients and adding those which were in low supply to her growing shopping list. It was a simple meal, as she was continuing to honor her owner's request. Being punctual as ever, the meal was completed, plated, and cooling to eat as she sat in the living room waiting her owner's return. When she heard the car roll into the driveway, she ran to the door, unlocking it and standing close by for their entry. She felt very nervous, but why? They'd never know what she had planned. But that did little to assuage the feeling that hung over her like a weight. As they entered, she gave a big welcome home, with extra care to make sure they weren't in a bad mood beforehand, not wanting a repeat of the previous day. But work hadn't quite taken the toll her owner had expected, and they were glad to be home. And to see you. She helped gather their things, taking their work bag amidst a flurry of objections, but they didn't fight long or very hard and let her take the bag and followed her to their room, something she'd never done before. They entered together and she placed the bag on their desk, hiding the top layer of papers, and her crime, from view. They started going through their drawers to change into something more comfortable, and she let them know that dinner was ready in the kitchen. She returned there on her own, leaving her owner to change, and pulled a chair up next to theirs. They joined her soon enough and sat down, not seeming to mind how close she now sat to them, and she started to tell them all about her walk today. They so graciously listened and added little comments. She found it enjoyable to tell them everything about her walk and making more flowers for the bouquet. They wore a smile the whole time, obviously pleased that their suggestion was such a big hit. "Well, I'm really glad you liked it so much. It's just one of those things you see all the time but never do even though it's so close, her owner said, making good time on their meal. Yes, it was fun. I'd like to go back, she added softly, wondering if they'd pick up on the hint. Well, feel free. You don't have to ask permission, just whenever you want to go, they said, through another mouthful. Thank you, but I was thinking that maybe next time. She was choosing her words, but her owner caught her meaning and gave her a big smile and nod. I'd like to go check it out with you. We could do that this weekend. How does that sound? Fun enough? Yes, she shouted excitedly. She just couldn't contain herself sometimes, but it didn't matter now to either party. The conversation then turned to her owner's day at work, which she found equally important. She liked hearing about how they were able to handle something, or all the little gossip bits about their fellow coworkers. Her owner finished their dinner, but still the two of them talked, going over so much. It was so calming to hear them talk about nothing in particular after she had missed them so much today, and she wondered if they felt the same way. Well, they are talking with you. Sometimes the little voice didn't need correcting, it seemed. As their talk wound down, another brief scuffle ensued as she attempted to take her owner's dishes to the sink, only to be met by a kind but firm assurance that they didn't need that much help to live, and they once again invited her to watch TV before bed. Even though it was expected, her spirit rose at the suggestion, and she dutifully followed them into the living room, waiting until they had seated themselves to sit beside them. Reach out, hug them now. Without thinking, her body lurched forward and she latched onto her owner, just like last night. She felt sad when they didn't put their arm around her like before, but it was difficult to fully quell her joy at sitting with them, hugging them tight as who cared what played on TV. The night wound on with the world's most unimportant show droning in the background before her owner let out a yawn and decided it was time for bed. They tugged themselves free from her grip, and the two exchanged good nights as they left her in the quiet living room alone with her thoughts, wishing she could go with them. There hasn't been one time so far that they didn't enjoy your company. I shouldn't bother them when they're trying to sleep. She didn't really believe that, but it felt important to provide some pushback to this little voice that kept trying to tell her what to do. They were falling asleep on the couch, but were fine with you being there. Fine, let's just go see what they want then. With the little convincing she needed, she stood up, head held high, and marched to her owner's room. She listened at the door and could hear movement inside, so they hadn't gotten into bed yet. She gently tapped on the door and waited for her owner's muffled call before entering. Her owner hadn't even had time to change into their pajamas, and they were piling papers into their bag for work tomorrow. A quick spark of fear hit the Nandroid, something she hadn't felt up to this point. But they didn't appear to have noticed anything missing. I just wanted to check and make sure you didn't need anything else tonight. Their owner gave her a strained smile. Nope, I'm all set for tonight. Thank you, though. Okay, she responded. Her owner turned back to their desk and continued grabbing and sorting papers, but she remained still, not intending to leave so soon. But she didn't know what to say now. Ask if they'd like to be tucked in. Oh, what an idea. It was just too childish. But her owner noticed her delayed exit and spoke again. Everything okay? Yes. You're sure you don't need anything? I'm fine. Do you need anything? It was asked with complete sincerity and worry, and her heart melted just a little more. No. Would you like me to tuck you in? She said with a small laugh. Her owner dropped her smile and slouched, heaving a great sigh as they stared with a frown at the Nandroid. She instantly regretted the suggestion and shrunk. Her owner shuffled over to the bed and sat on the edge, gesturing for her to join them. She hesitated. Something wasn't right with this scenario. Come here, let's talk, they said, patting the spot next to them. Her mind said beware, but she couldn't ignore a request from them, so her body took control again and walked over to the bed, sitting softly on the edge as her owner put an arm around her shoulders and squeezed her close, eliciting a range of errors for her. Look, you've been very different the past few days, and that's a good thing. I like this new you. You're more spontaneous, more outgoing, more confident. It's like you're the real robot you always were supposed to be, and I'm happy for you. It feels like you're more than just a maid now. Her head was spinning. She could barely follow what they were saying as every conceivable error alert she had built into her system was screeching at max output. What did this mean? I'm glad this new you is here, and I'm glad it's so important to you to show you're thankful, but here's the thing. You don't have to baby me. I can take my own dishes to the sink, I can watch TV by myself if you aren't interested, and I sure as hell can get into my own bed. I'm just here to help you. Thank you, I know that, but you don't need to do all these basic things for me. How would you like it if I plugged you in at night? She felt her cheeks erupt and stammered a non-response, unsure if she was meant to answer that truthfully or not. Her owner stood up and swept the Nandroid up from the bed into a very dignified hold, supporting her back with one hand and her legs with the other. All right then, let's see how you like it. They slowly heaved her out into the hallway and down to her room, taking extra effort to fiddle with the knob before entering, and as carefully as they could, but still rather unceremoniously, dropped her onto her charging station, reaching down and picking her charging cable up and gave it a quick click into the back of her head. She let out a small eep as the plug made the connection and a quick shock entered her system. Plugging herself in was one thing, but having someone else do it was not a feeling she was used to, and her owner's playful demeanor vanished in an instant. Sorry, does that hurt? Sorry, I didn't know. I wasn't. No, it didn't hurt. It was just, I wasn't ready. Ah, jeez, I'm sorry. I was just being dumb. No, really, I'm fine. I'm okay. She reached her hands out and squeezed their arm, wanting to affirm to them that she was all right and they hadn't done anything wrong, but their expression didn't change. She hated seeing them so conflicted and lowered her hands to pick up one of theirs, giving it a tight squeeze and bringing it close to her chest. Tell them how you feel. Go away, not now. You didn't hurt me, I just wasn't ready, and I've never had someone else do that before. I'm the one who should be sorry, I shouldn't have bothered you, and I'll stop waiting on you hand and foot. She didn't know if this was entirely true, but she felt like she would say anything to make them feel better. After a terse moment where she was worried her owner's hand might get burned from the heat she was putting off, it seemed to work, and they slackened and leaned closer. You weren't bothering me. I'm always happy to see you. I will try and loosen up since you're eager to help if you promise to not treat me like a baby. Deal? Deal, she mumbled out. Her circuitry was at its limits. This extended encounter was taking a toll on her, and it was getting harder and harder to process everything that was going on. Tell them how you feel! Her mouth opened involuntarily, and panic struck her core, adding to the overload of internal errors. Her owner noticed and leaned in, towering over her as she squeezed their hand even tighter. She could make out every detail on their face from the light her cheeks was giving off. What is it? Her voice caught. She couldn't say it, the forbidden, taboo phrase not meant for her to convey. But her body was in the process of saying it. There was only one out here. She leaned back in her chair and initiated sleep mode mid-thought. Dealing with these emotions was beginning to get difficult. All night long, she relived the same minutes, holding them as tightly as she could as they carried her around and around. This felt wonderful, being jostled around as she nestled her face into their chest. As the memory was replayed and backed up again and again, she noticed all the subtle things about them. The way their chest moved as they took a breath, the funny little huffs they did as they carried her around, and something so alien to her, their heartbeat. The soft but powerful rhythmic thud against her electric ear. These were all human things, strange and special to her. An entire night dedicated to this silly moment. All these little things about them she had never noticed before, being pushed to the forefront as she clung to them. She lost track of how many times the event was replayed, being totally engrossed in this perfect moment. But finally her battery reached its charge capacity and she was forced awake. It was a normal morning for the rest of the world, with the daylight coming in from behind the curtains telling her that she had beaten her owner awake again. She lay in the exact same spot as right before she went into sleep mode. She wondered about how her owner would react today, having seen such a display from her as she took the time to get up from her chair and shook the last dreams from her head. She was still wearing her other clothes and decided that today would have to be a uniform day so as to impress everyone at her owner's work, as she usually did. She thought back to the document she had stolen that was sitting in her dresser drawer. But there was no delayed guilt. Just as she had yesterday, the deed didn't bother her at all. In fact, she was excited and eager to get the call for her assistance. She hastily changed into her sterling uniform and popped into the kitchen to begin making breakfast, which today consisted of flapjacks and the last few eggs, which was now just another thing to put on the shopping list. She had hoped her owner didn't find it rude or strange of her to go directly into sleep mode while they were talking, but if they had any qualms with it, they were forgotten during the night. She heard her owner rise to their alarm and eventually met them with a bright good morning as they slumped down at the table and enjoyed their breakfast in silence. They didn't seem any different. They hadn't taken any longer to get to the table. It seemed her devious plan was working. They hadn't noticed the missing papers. She took the seat adjacent to them and patiently waited. While she enjoyed talking with them, just sitting with them was just as enjoyable, and she was able to daydream freely as they were preoccupied with their meal. She wondered what she would need to do for them to carry her like they had last night again. They finished the meal and sat back, letting the plate and silverware lay on the table. She didn't make any attempt to retrieve them, not wanting to seem overbearing and to honor the deal that was so recently struck. "Would you please clear the table for me?" her owner asked softly after a moment, a sly smile on their face. They really were so caring and accommodating. She couldn't stop herself from giving a small shout of excitement, and she enthusiastically gathered the few dishes from the table and took them to the sink, adding them to the pile from yesterday. Her owner stood and stretched, happy to now officially start their day as they went to the front door. She followed behind as a nervous excitement began to build inside her. They were moments away from leaving, which would cement her plan into action. They would have to rely on her to bring the paperwork at this point. They gathered their things and exchanged some swift goodbyes, which normally would have saddened her, but sacrifices had to be made, and the longer they stayed here, the more time they would have to notice something was missing. A farewell nod and soft goodbye, and they were gone, doors shut and locked. She went to the window and waited. Her owner walked to their car, all good. They got in and sat their work bag to the side. Perfect! They waited to start the car. And waited. And waited. Something wasn't right. It had been at least 30 seconds and they weren't leaving yet. Her excitement began to turn into fear, and she wondered if she shouldn't go in and retrieve the paper now to run out to them and avoid any embarrassing situations of them returning to the house to find it. But there, the car started up. Whatever had delayed them wasn't important enough for their return, and she watched as the car drove down the driveway and exited onto the road, out of sight. The floodgates were opened. She leapt with joy and gave a squeal. It had worked! She tore through the house and retrieved the hidden paperwork, bringing it to the table along with the phone, and sat down with both. She had already started calculating the travel time her owner would need, how long it would take them to get inside and sit down, unpack their bag, notice the missing papers, and give her a call. She had a while to wait with even the fastest traffic conditions, so she started planning out what she would say when she got there. She had to act smooth. She couldn't be all jittery like this when she arrived. She also had to factor in her own travel time. Even if they made it quickly to their office, she'd have to be quick too if she wanted to make it in time before the appointment. She'd have to leave immediately to catch the early bus and make it into town on the first rotation, but that was a no-brainer. Could she get there faster by taxi? She could, but that would mean taking some money from her owner, which she was allowed to do, but still felt like a bridge too far. Try as she might now, she just couldn't sit still and began pacing around the table. If this worked, how often could she do it? Once or twice in close succession wouldn't raise alarm, but any more than that would just lead to suspicion. What about once a week? That still seemed too frequent. She very rarely had to deliver things to them. But what else could she do to make more trips like this? No other simple ideas were coming to her. There had to be something she could do more often that would allow her to spend more time during the day with her owner. Her ideas began to become more and more outlandish. She could call their business and make a fake appointment for a new client and require some special paperwork that she could hide the night before. She could sabotage their car, make the two of them have to travel into town by bus, which would take much longer. The phone rang, and before it even finished its first ring, she had picked up the receiver. Hello? Hey, sorry to bother you. I left something at the house, I think. Can you go check my desk for a packet of papers for the McLaughlins? Of course, just a moment. She set the receiver down on the table and went to her owner's room. She had to be convincing, so she spent a minute ruffling through the remaining papers, pretending she was actually looking. After what she felt was a reasonable amount of time, she went back into the kitchen and picked up the phone. I found it. Do you need me to bring it to you? Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Their appointment is soon, so grab some money and just take a cab. Okay, I'll leave right away. Thanks, I'll see you soon. She hung up and gave a triumphant yell. It was working. She gathered her things together before running back into her owner's room and grabbed some money from their desk. She put everything into her purse and left, locking the house up behind herself. It was another beautiful day, and still being early meant there were few people out. She walked as quickly as she could through the empty sidewalks while still maintaining her air of superiority to one of the main road's bus stops, where the taxi usually passed by. It was just a few minutes' walk, and she arrived quickly to a small group at the bus stop, already waiting. She was making great time. She watched down the road, and it only took a moment before a taxi could be seen, which she flagged down. She got in and gave the address to the human driver, and they were off. It was a silent trip, which suited her just fine as she was still feeling very anxious. She began to practice what she might say and how she would act to the other employees, going over many different situations in her mind. Luckily, the early morning rush had already died down, and much sooner than she expected they arrived. It was an unremarkable few-story building in the heart of downtown, off of any major road but still close enough to be part of the hustle and bustle. She paid the cabbie and entered the business, taking the stairs to the second story rather than wait for the elevator. She entered onto the floor, which was arranged into many cubicles, the sound of computers and even typewriters clattering away, mixed with phones ringing and the soft murmur of many hushed conversations. Her owner had their own private office in the nearest corner of the floor, so she made her way there and walked up to the reception desk, smiling at the receptionist, whose name she couldn't remember. Oh, hi. Go ahead, they're waiting for you. She gave a small bow and thanked them, walking around their desk into the corner of the room, gently knocking on the open door as she entered her owner's small office. Ah, hey, thanks a ton. Can't believe I forgot that. Where was it? It had fallen off the side of the desk. She had already trained for this moment and was executing it perfectly so far. These little lies were beginning to flow so easily. She reached into her purse and handed over the paperwork. So stupid. This is a bigger client and I completely forgot about it. Good thing I've got you though, right? The praise she was receiving now finalized it in her mind. She hadn't done anything wrong, and on the contrary, it was something good. Accidents happen. I'm just glad I was able to make it in time. They went back to the paperwork they had and started marking things here and there and smiled. Well, I really appreciate it. We'll have to do something else special this weekend as a repayment. How's that sound? Her electronic heart leapt at this news. That sounds wonderful. All right then. You can go ahead and take a cab back. No reason to make you take the bus. It's fine. I don't mind. I can go to the store while I'm in town. You got a big list? They said, pausing their writing and glancing up. Not especially. Just some things we need to stock up on. Gonna wait until the weekend? I can take you. Yes, of course. She could feel herself blushing. It was all just too much. This hastily hatched plan had turned out even better than she ever could have hoped. Sounds like we're going to have a full day then, they said, smiling, and turned back to their paperwork. Have a safe trip home and go ahead and take the cab. All right. She hadn't planned for it to go this smoothly. She didn't know what else to say and they were obviously busy, but she couldn't leave just yet. She stood watching them continue writing before thinking of something else to bring up. So, your day hasn't been too hectic? They didn't look up when they answered, but were still cheerful. Well, not yet at least. Early mornings are all the big clients usually, so while important, they're more laid back. The afternoon is when stuff really hits the fan. They gave a short laugh at their own insight, followed by one from her, providing them positive reinforcement. There was a pair of recliners to the side of her owner's desk, and she slowly made her way towards one to sit down, before another knock came from behind her, and she turned to see the receptionist at the door leaning in. The McLaughlins just called. They asked if their appointment could be moved up, and I told them now is fine. They'll be here in a few minutes, they reported. Her owner looked up, intently following the news. All right, that's fine. It's great your own personal secretary is so quick, the receptionist added, nodding to the Nandroid. Her owner leaned back from their paperwork and sighed. I've told her before that if we had some automation here, things would run a whole lot smoother. Well, you'll just have to bring her around more often. She can take my job. Oh, hell no, can't get rid of you just yet. The pair laughed and the receptionist went back to their desk. A new, strange feeling was bubbling inside the Nandroid now. She felt angry? She didn't much like this receptionist suddenly. The way they were so talkative and kind to her owner. It was a fiery feeling. Like something was poking her from the inside when she thought about the two of them. She dared to probe a little deeper. I forget, how long have they worked here? The receptionist? Oh, 2 years, I think? You can ask them on the way out, they're really nice. The fire burned brightly when they said that, causing her to shake for just a moment before she regained control of herself. Have you ever gone anywhere with them? Her owner looked up, confused about this abrupt line of questioning. Huh? What do you mean? Nothing. I hope you have a nice day. She gave a formal bow, wishing she could go around the desk and give them a more personal farewell. They accepted the quick exchange and gave her another happy look before going back to their work one final time. She left her owner's office and made her way back to the stairway and the receptionist's desk. They were just reading a magazine, not even doing any actual work. How horrible. The receptionist looked up as the Nandroid arrived and gave her a small wave before going back to their magazine. The Nandroid stopped at the desk, inadvertently wearing a terse frown, and waited for the human to speak. Can I help you? I just wanted to say thank you for always being so helpful to my owner. They can be forgetful sometimes, so your assistance is appreciated. Oh, not a problem. It is my job, after all. This callous, blunt, greedy human didn't care about her owner at all. They were just doing a job for money, and they got to spend all day near her owner instead of her. The Nandroid put on her best sterling smile and pointed down a few cubicles. I did notice someone was having trouble a few rows back. I let them know I'd ask for your assistance, if you don't mind. Oh, yeah, no trouble. The receptionist reluctantly stood up, leaving their magazine on the desk, and walked away in the general direction the Nandroid had pointed. On the desk was a cup of water that they had been drinking, and after she looked left and right to make sure the coast was clear, she knocked the drink over, spilling its contents onto the magazine, and made a hasty departure. She came out onto the street, but didn't look for another cab. She decided the slow way home, via bus, was preferable. It would give her more time to think about everything that had happened. In no rush and on autopilot, she made her way to the nearest bus stop, going over everything that had just happened. She wasn't sure why she had just done that. It just happened. Dealing with these emotions was beginning to get difficult. The thought of going back and helping to clean up entered her mind briefly, but she shot it down instantly. She felt bad that she had done it. but certainly not that much regret. She wasn't sure what that meant. They were happy to see you. She didn't think of a response. Of course she knew that, and not just because she had delivered something to them either. She tried thinking of a single time when being around them hadn't been a positive experience for them both, but no time came to mind. Every single interaction they had ever had always ended in something good happening. They were the most perfect beings she had ever had the pleasure of being around, and this plan had worked out so perfectly, she just needed to think of some more ways to get to them during the day. The bus arrived and she climbed aboard, using the bus pass from her purse. She spent the long ride home deep in thought, but nothing new came to her. There just didn't seem to be a way to give her a reason to go see them, unless she manufactured it herself through nefarious means. The bus arrived at her stop and she absentmindedly exited, walking home at a much slower pace than she used to get there. Just go there. They've already said they would like you being there to help. Now there was an idea. Maybe that's what she should do. Just take the bus to their office one day. She could stay in their office and help run things, staying out of the way when needed. She started wondering why her owner hadn't suggested this before, seeing as they were always talking about how helpful she'd be, especially now that she had so much free time during the day. Before she knew it, she was home, standing on the porch, still lost in thought. Unlocking the door, she let herself in and hung up her purse, her adventure finally over, and she was now able to fully relax. She walked back to her owner's bedroom, fully intent on making their bed, as she had skipped out on it earlier. Once in their room, however, her lonely melancholy returned. She could see the indent they'd left in the sheets, their pillow crumpled in the rough shape of their head. She ran her hands over the spot very gently, so as not to disturb this monument to her purpose in life. Get in. What a silly idea. Robots don't need to lay in beds, she thought to herself as she pulled back the covers. Another instance of what her owner didn't know wouldn't hurt them, and would only benefit her. She laid gracefully down into her owner's spot and pulled the covers over herself, sinking as deep as she could into this soft palace. Well, she didn't feel different physically, but mentally was another story. This is where her owner slept each night, safe and secure. The thought suddenly occurred to her that she had never actually seen them sleeping. They'd napped a few times on the couch, but she had never seen them asleep in their bed. She wondered how they would look. And did they have dreams about her? She stayed and daydreamed for much too long about the ramifications of them feeling the same way about her as she did about them, and was only brought out of her own mind by the arrival of traffic down their sleepy street as the day was ending. She snapped awake and quickly made the bed and fluffed the pillow. How could she have dawdled this long? She hurried to the kitchen and started dinner, cursing her lazybones attitude. Dealing with these emotions was beginning to get difficult. A hodgepodge mix of ingredients were all that she had, but she wasn't an android for nothing, and she was able to whip up something quick using what was available, completing the meal just as her owner arrived home. They had no complaints over the hasty meal, so she considered it another job well done, and was treated to praise from her over her helpful nature today. At this point, nothing could sour her mood or make her think twice about what she had done. Only positive things had come about from her wild behavior, that just a week ago she never could have imagined. As dinner was finished, they didn't ask her to clear the table this time, instead doing it themselves. She oh so wanted to do it, but she remembered their deal. Her owner paused at the sink, noticing the uncharacteristic stack of dishes from the past few days. Want help with the dishes? She had a pang of sadness hit. The thought of making them ask for this manual labor assist was revolting, even more so now that it happened a second time. She had to come up with a reason for why they hadn't been done yet. No, Yes, let them help. Spend time with them. She stopped abruptly and let the thought process. Why not allow this? Why not spend time close to them doing something? Anything? They said so themselves. She didn't have to baby them, and they definitely did their own dishes before she was around. Yes, please, she happily called, bouncing to her feet and hopping over to join them at the sink. What ensued was the slowest cleaning she had ever done, and not just because she had to rely on another to help or because they conversed the whole time. She slowly cleaned each plate, taking the time and enjoying the feeling this moment gave. That it wasn't just a maid and her owner doing chores, but two individuals happily running a household together. But reality soon set in again, and all good things must come to an end, as all the dishes were cleaned by her and dried by her owner, each getting put away with a soft tink. Her owner retreated to the kitchen table, electing to read the paper tonight instead of sitting in front of the TV, much to her dismay. But at least now is the perfect time for her to finish her origami book. She retrieved it and silently worked on the last few flowers, making sure all the edges were creased perfectly and deftly, using the experience she had gained from her previous attempts and making them crisper and cleaner than before. As she finished the last one and gleefully showed her owner, they slid over a page from their newspaper, having read all the interesting articles. Think you can fold this too? Of course. What would you like? Surprise me. So she flipped to a random page in her book and found a jumbo newspaper butterfly. While the lack of colors left something to be desired, functionally it was correct and a wonder to behold at its size alone. And as she finished, her owner completed another page of their paper and slid it over to her. This continued for a while, and with each page she acquired, she dutifully folded it with grace. Upon completion of each one, the pair shared a laugh at the giant animal shapes that began to fill the table. A lion, a dog, and one very long snake. As the paper dwindled in her owner's hands, they gave a yawn and checked the time. It was certainly getting late for them, so the pair exchanged their good nights, her owner being sure to let her know that they would tuck themselves in extra tight tonight and wishing her sweet dreams before heading to bed. She left the table as it was and retired to her own room, climbing into her charging chair, wishing silently to herself that she had been carried there. Today had been spectacular, and they hadn't even gone anywhere or done anything out of the ordinary. Knowing this, she couldn't wait for the weekend and what it might hold. This was the thought she held on to as she went into sleep mode, thinking to herself the forbidden phrase she couldn't say to them out loud.